Good morning, everyone. My name is Kim York, and I work with the KDE EERP support team. It's that time of year again, PSD, CSD season, our professional staff data and our classified staff data reporting. It's the season for me that kicks off the holiday season. We have PSD, CSD in September, then we have trick-or-treating, Thanksgiving, and Christmas. I know all of you look forward to it. So first, let me introduce our team. We have Kristen Lambert, who is our team lead and technical analyst, myself, Kim York, who is a technical analyst, and Kathy Pelletier, who is our Tyler Technologies vendor partner. And as you see at the top, if you ever have questions on state reporting, PSD, CSD, or any other state reports, you can contact our EERP team at EERP@education.ky.gov. So first, I want to introduce Crystal Smith, who is an administrative branch manager for the Office of Finance and Operations. She's going to talk a little bit about the importance of the PSD and CSD reports. Crystal?
Thank you, Kimberly. So again, my name is Crystal Smith, and I am the branch manager over the branch who actually accepts in and reviews the PSD, CSD. I just wanted to talk with everyone this morning to let you know how basically the why of why does KDE need this information? What do they do with it? Because I think a lot of people don't know the importance of this data, and especially how important the accurate data is for us. We have federal reports that we submit this data to. We have national reports that compare Kentucky amongst the other states. And if we don't have, the exact how much salaries we are paying and what like all the codings, we can't accurately portray the importance of what Kentucky's doing for our school districts. So I just wanted to specify how important it is to get accurate data from you guys. And if you have questions, to please reach out to us. We're all here to help. And then also another report that's kind of important for us here at KDE is when we get that PSD, CSD data during the biennial budget, the General Assembly reaches out to us for how much it would actually cost for the school districts in Kentucky to maybe give a 5% raise. And if we don't have the actual how much money is being spent on salaries, then we're giving them a data that's not correct. And if by, one of these days maybe they'll give us money for those raises, but if we don't have the accurate data, then we won't be fully funded for that, those kind of things. So just please just know how important it is, and that's just basically an idea of why we get the data in. So I just wanted to thank the KD Enterprise ERP group for letting us talk about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Crystal. So we're going to start out with the EPSB ID import program before we get into the actual PSD and CSD reports. The EPSB ID import report, it's going to build a file that's going to contain teacher EPSB license numbers to upload into Enterprise ERP. And just to kind of highlight Enterprise ERP, we are no longer using Munis in most things. We're transitioning out to Enterprise ERP. So you'll see that throughout the broadcast. And it matches the import file to the last 4 digits of the employee social security number and date of birth in Enterprise ERP. And it imports the associated EPSB ID into the state ID field on the employee master. So this is kind of just a graphic to give you an idea of how the process works. So you're going to begin an Infinite Campus where you'll pull a validation report. That validation report you will make corrections to get the most accurate data in Infinite Campus before you pull the EPSB ID report. Then you'll save that report to your computer. Then you'll move over to EERP. You'll upload the EPSB ID file to the EPSB ID program. You'll check the error report, make manual corrections in EERP, then you'll run your PSD-CSD report and watch for error 50. So the validation report itself and the EERP Munis upload file is pulled from Infinite. The validation report is. Kristen, did you need anything? I thought I heard somebody say something.
Nope, I was muted. I'm
Okay,
not sure.
okay,
You're good.
okay.
You're good to go. And if since I'm chatting here, hey, this is Kristen. If anybody had any questions during the webcast, there is a Q&A chat box up at the top, so feel free to drop any questions in there, and I'll respond to it, and also work with them and Kim when we take breaks. Thanks.
Absolutely, that was actually in my notes to mention, and I went right over top of it. We will have question and answer sessions too between sessions of the presentation. You can ask during those times or at the end or anytime in that Q&A box. And thank you, Kristen, I did overlook that. So the validation report is pulled from Infinite Campus, and here you have the pathway to the to both reports in Infinite Campus. And in the campus toolbar, you'll choose a single school or all schools to report, and then you'll choose the report type, whether you want the validation report or the Munis upload file, but they're both in the same place. So the validation report reports actively employed staff, even including those with no EPSB-ID license numbers. The final column in the report indicates if the staff will be on the upload file with a Y or an N. Other information you'll see on this report is names, birth dates, last four of social, and their license numbers. And the good thing about this report is if there is a field or a cell that is missing information, it's highlighted in yellow, so it draws your attention to it to see if it's something that you need to add information to. And corrections to records must be made in Infinite Campus before the EPSB upload file is created. And this is for you to get the most accurate information. You're still going to pull over a file that may have some lacking information, but it's going to get it as accurate as possible. But any questions in regards to Infinite Campus, because our team does not work with Infinite Campus, should be directed to Megan Alfonso, and you have her contact information there as well. And this is what the EPSB-ID import file looks like that you should be importing over to EERP. It's produced from Infinite Campus and it's in Excel format. Do not import the validation report. The validation report, every year I have people try to import the validation report. They get errors. They contact me, and we realize they're just trying to import the incorrect file. So this is your pathway to the EPSB-ID import program within Munis. This is your steps that you'll take in the program. I've highlighted 8 and 9, which tells you that EPSB numbers will import into the state ID field of the employee master. And once you've generated your PSD CSD reports, the EPSB ID field will be in the EPSB ID field in those report records. So these are the 2 errors that you can get with the EPSB ID import. The first being the import file does not match an existing employee in EERP. Reasons for that: the last 4 digits of the social or the date of birth does not match an employee in EERP. Possible solutions here are that the social security number or date of birth may need to be corrected in either Infinite Campus or Enterprise ERP, and you would need to make those corrections in the appropriate system. And an employee may not exist in EERP. So employees in Infinite Campus may not exist in Enterprise ERP. An example here would be technology teachers use Infinite Campus for scheduling purposes, but are not actual employees of the district. And 2, we have the duplicate last 4 of social security number and date of birth. First, that's going to be extremely rare. We've only seen that happen in 1 instance, and that instance was where information for one employee was accidentally entered for another employee that was found quickly. And so again, that's going to be a rare. And then occasionally we think that this has been pretty much corrected, but you may see an employee who is in both employee master and the terminated employee master, making it look like there are 2 individuals with the same social security, last 4 of social and date of birth. So the PSD report, this is your EPSB-ID errors. You're going to get code 50. And it's going to be a PSD report only, because this is the only report where the EPSB-ID numbers are required. So error code 50 says no EPSB-ID number required for PSD reporting. Each employee on the PSD report is required to have an EPSB number. You will need to obtain that number and add it to the employee master manually. You can utilize your validation report in that regard as well. So again, I'll say this a few times through the presentation. A CSD employee could have an EPSB-ID number that pulls over, and that's perfectly fine. It's just not required for CSD employees, only PSD. And that EPSB ID number is what drives PSD. For a person to be on PSD, their position, their job description should require that they have an EPSB ID number. So finding the EPSB ID number in KEX. So let's talk about that for a second. So in the past, it has been that if an employee applies for an EPSB ID number, there was this thought that there was a waiting period for that employee to get that number, and that is not the case. When an employee applies for an EPSB ID number, that number is assigned automatically. You can find these numbers through the KEX system. And I'm going to go through the next few slides to kind of give you a general idea of how you do that. We did have somebody from this division present it the last time, but I think I understand exactly what needs to happen. So first, you're going to log into the URL that you see on the screen after signing in. Then you're going to go to Profile, which you'll see with the red arrow, and which point you will then choose Reports, and you'll generate a report choosing the district role report. When that happens, you're going to choose the three little dots at the top right of your screen, and then choose .csv file, and then you're going to get the district role report. And in that first column, you'll see the EPSB ID numbers. So you'll be able to pull those numbers for anybody that you're missing. So you can no longer put the series of 9s. You can no longer not have an EPSB ID number for someone. You would need to go to the KEX system and get that. And if they haven't applied, you need to have them apply and get that number as again, it will be assigned immediately, and you'll be able to get that number and enter it for the PSD reporting. So questions about finding the EPSB ID number in KEX, you'll need to contact again Megan Alfonso, and you have her contact information below. So why is this process necessary? Why do we have to have EPSB ID numbers? The PSD and CSD files now include EPSB license numbers. Again, PSD is the only area where they're required. This allows KDE to minimize the use of staff Social Security numbers. And are EPSB numbers required for classified staff? As I said, I'm probably going to say this a few times. No, classified staff who report on the CSD file are not required to have an EPSB ID number. They may have it from other jobs they've had, but it's not required for CSD reporting. So if you have questions about the EPSB ID import that goes into EERP, those will go to our team, to the state reporting team, and the email is there, eerp@education.ky.gov. So let's get started now with the classified staff data, the CSD report. This is just your overview of the CSD report. This report produces an electronic file of classified employee information. It's required to be submitted to KDE no later than October 1st, and it produces using employee data from Employee Master, Employee Job Salary Records, and Job Class Master Records. So this is the criteria for someone to actually pull into the report, to pull into the CSD report. They would have a summary class code that falls between 7000 and 7999. Their group BU would be CLAS or RCLA, R standing for retired, hired as of September 15th of the fiscal year. So we're going to jump into the thing that I think is the thorn in everyone's side when it comes to doing CSD or PSD. It's your allocation codes. So you have the example here is an employee who performs a single job but at several locations. They will have multiple CSD records due to the allocation code set up on the job salary record. An example here, and we're going to have a graphic that's going to help you understand that coming up as well, is that we have an instructional assistant who works equally at 4 elementary schools. There will be 4 CSD records with a base pay of FTE of 1 on each record because they're only doing one job, but an allocation of 25 for each of the elementary schools. If you think of an allocation code more as a GL code, you're paying from 4 different GL codes. That's kind of how you would want to think about your allocation. Where's that money coming from? One job, but paid from 4 different GL codes. If the contract is for 186 days, the contract days reported on each CSD record will be 46.5. So again, we're dividing out that 186 days by the 4 elementary schools where this employee works. The base pay records for a single job class code will always equal 1 for allocation, and the days will always add up to the standard contract. The FTE percent is to be 1 for all records. The annual salary, reference salary, and days are prorated based on the allocation percentage. So here we have Betsy, and Betsy is an instructional assistant. She has 1 job class code, but she is divided between 4 elementary schools where she assists. So her FTE is 1. She does 1 job. That's how you want to think about this, is how many jobs is Betsy doing? She's only doing 1. So, but she's doing this at 4 schools. So we see that her allocation for each is 25%. Her days are divided by that percentage. So her 186 is divided out by 4 at 46.5. So next, the other part of this is the FTE. So employees who perform multiple jobs. Now, Betsy had 1 job. This employee performs multiple jobs. They will have multiple pay records with an FTE equivalent of less than 1, because it's got to add up to 1 as to the multiple jobs that they have. So an employee is an instructional assistant half-time and a supply service aide half-time. Each position, think of it as job class code, will have an FTE of 0.5. So they're 50% in one position and 50 in the other. If the same employee was an instructional assistant at 2 different schools, the instructional assistant position would have an FTE of 50, but also be broken down to the allocation, right? Because that GL code is going to be different between the 2 schools where they are an instructional assistant. And so we have Bradley here, and he has 2 job class codes, but 1 location. So we have Bradley as an instructional assistant. Simple, his FTE is half, 50%. Bradley is supply service aide. CSD record, the FTE is 50. It's going to add to 1 FTE. That one's simple enough. But here we have Bradley as an instructional assistant at 2 different schools, right? With John Doe Elementary and Mary Doe Elementary. So still the FTE is going to remain the same. It's 50 on each record, but we're going to break to 2 more records with the allocation where 50% is at John Doe and at Mary Doe Elementary. So the allocation is going to break down further there. And hopefully this will be something that you can reference. This whole presentation is meant to be used as a tool for you when you're actually going through this. I've tried to, graphics help me. I'm a visual person. I like to see these things. It helps me, see these things better. So hybrid employees. A note will appear at the end of the report. Check the setup of hybrid employees. This is a reminder for you to verify employees who are serving in a classified position but paying into TRS are included on the CSD report. And some examples here are your FSCI directors, CCLC directors, finance officers, or your school nurse. And the note here is something that I mentioned in the beginning of the presentation. Only employees who serve in a position requiring a teaching certificate with EPSB will be reported on the PSD file. Hybrid employees must be set up in the employee master and employee job salary with a group BU of CLAS and summary class codes in the 7,000 range. So generating the CSD records, this is simply your path to getting to the CSD report and the screen that you will see when it is open. And you're defined. So you'll choose generate from the ribbon, then choose define and enter the information for the current year and hit accept. Then choose execute from the ribbon. And if you have errors, you need to output the error report and correct those errors. So manually updating CSD records. So some errors can be resolved by updating the employee record on the CSD screen. You simply select search, put in the desired criteria and accept. You'll select update to make the changes and select accept to save the changes. But our note here is really important. Districts are strongly encouraged to make all necessary changes in employee master and or job salary. If changes are made on those records, the same problems will exist when future CSD records are generated. So you can correct an error just on the CSD record itself and submit it and go on. But it's always highly recommended that you go back into the employee master or employee job salary, make those corrections there so that they're a permanent correction and will help you moving forward. So you can manually add a CSD record as well. The employee must exist in employee master before you can add a CSD record. This is your steps for adding. You'll select add, enter the appropriate information on the screen and select accept. The same note here applies. Any time that you can actually go over and do this in Employee Master, Employee Job Salary Records, it will, avoid the same need to add this employee going forward in the future. So creating the electronic file. Once the CSD records have been reviewed and edited, a file must be created for submission to KDE. You'll do a find for all of the records and then select the electronic file button. A CSD file is then automatically created, and you will see the file name at the bottom of your screen. You'll want to make note of that for the submission process. And submitting the file to KDE. The CSD file must be submitted to KDE by October 1st. It is submitted through the Seek Data web submission application. We're going to cover a little more about this as we get into the presentation further. So this is your most common CSD report errors. The first one is 6.5, an invalid object code on CSD record. The problem here is that an object code on the CLAS Group VU summary class in 7,000 range does not contain the appropriate GL object code. Valid object codes for CSD reporting are 0130, 31, and 60. Invalid object codes will create a CSD error. So the correction here is to update the employee master record and/or job salary record with the appropriate object code. And this is a graphic from the actual. It's in both the PSD and CSD guides. It shows you that a classified summary class code of 7,000 to 7999 uses object codes 0130, 31, and 60. So licensed nurses should be coded to object code 0160. And another note here is that full-time classified employees should never have only a pay record with object code 0131 extra duty. They need an 0130 or an 0160 for their base pay object code as well. So error code 11, no race selected. The problem here is that no race selections have been made on the employee master record. If no, not Hispanic, you'll see here, is selected in the ethnicity field, a race must be selected. So if you choose no, you've got to have a race selected below. So the correction here is choose the appropriate race selections on the employee master record. Race, you may not choose 2 or more races, and you're going to see that at the bottom of the race. It's just the reporting organizations that we send these reports to do not acknowledge 2 or more races. You can mark 2 or more races, but you cannot choose the field that says 2 or more races. So why do we have this on the employee master, right? That's what you're asking. Employee master is kind of a international program for Tyler. So we don't have the say in what we can change, add or delete to with employee master. So this is something that Tyler has added to the employee master. It's there, but we cannot use it as a Kentucky school district. Last bullet says, if yes, Hispanic is chosen, nothing should be marked under race. So if you choose yes, Hispanic under ethnicity, I can't get that out today, ethnicity, yes, then you don't need to choose anything. So error code 16, an invalid summary class code. The problem here is that a summary class code outside the list of valid KDE codes exists on the pay record. The correction here is to update the job class master record with a valid summary class code. You can actually go out and create a summary class code. I've tested it and you can do that, and you absolutely should not be. The summary class codes that are there that you can choose from are the KDE or EPSBID assigned codes. Those should never change. You can create a job class code tied to a valid summary class code, but you should never be adding or creating your own summary class code. And for a detailed list of allowable classification codes, you're going to refer to this document, which is found in the payroll statewide section of the KDE Enterprise ERP support guides. And you are going to be getting a copy of this presentation after all is said and done, and you'll have these links to the various things that we have you linked to, guides, etc. When you receive that. And again, you're seeing another piece of that graphic. It's showing you classified summary class code 7,000 to 999. If you create a job class code, you need to use the 8,000 to 899 range. And again, the valid object codes are 0130, 31, and 60. So group CSD error 26 is an invalid group BU, job class, or object code. This is very common. We see this all the time. So the error will generate when an employee has an invalid combination of group BU, job class code, and or object code. The correction here is to update the employee master and or job salary records to reflect the appropriate combination. So you're seeing here valid combinations would be BU, CLAS, or RCLA, the summary job class between 7,000 and 7,999, object codes 0130, 310160. So you want to ensure the group BU, summary job code, and object code are coordinated. We see a lot of like the group BU be CLAS, but then an 0110, which is a certified base pay object code, be there. You want to make sure that you're actually using classified summary class codes and object codes. Same with PSD, you want to have certified group BUs with, you know, the 0110, and that they're all coordinated to match. So error code 35, each of the CSD and PSD reports have a calculation, and these are always ones that we assist districts with. In this instance with CSD, it's hours times the contract days times the rate of pay minus the annual salaries outside of KDE parameters. You just need to check to see that that calculation of hours times contract days times hourly rate minus the annual field is plus or minus $25 for this to pass the error check. And you'll update the job salary record to reflect the appropriate information. And as you can see, the example there here that we have, it's contract days times the hourly, times hours times the contract days times the hourly rate gives us 38,875.20. The annual salary is also 38,875.20, which brings us to 0. So we're not out. So the most common CSD report warning is that a finance offer is not reported. For the district, it's warning 124. This warning is generated when there's no employee or job salary record with summary class 7166, 8485, or 86. The summary class codes involved with this warning, again, is 66, 84, 85, and 86. And the note here is that the finance officer would be reported on the PSD report if the position requires a certificate with EPSB. If the position requires a degree, but not a professional certificate from EPSB, the employee is reported on the CSD report. So you can simply ignore it if this person is going to be on the PSD report. But if they should be on the CSD report, you want to make sure that they're there. So we can stop for a minute to see if there are any questions about CSD reporting. You can ask questions in the chat area again, or later you can always send those to our team at eerp@education.ky.gov. And I will stop for just a couple of seconds. There is a little bit of a delay to make sure that we don't have any questions regarding CSD reporting. Kristen, do we have anything yet?
Hey, Kim, no questions as of yet.
Give it a few seconds and see if anyone has any questions. Kristen, do you think we're ready to move on?
Sure. There's usually a slight delay, and we can always take questions at the end. So if y'all have any questions at all during this presentation, just go ahead and drop it here in the Q&A. And then, of course, once the webcast is done, feel free to send that box and email box a question, and we'll respond to you then.
Question period before we get to the end. So if you have any questions, feel free to go ahead and throw them in the box, and we'll get to them when we get to the next question and answer session. Now we're going to move on to the PSD report. So this is an overview of the PSD report. The professional staff data report produces an electronic file containing certified employee salary information to be submitted to KDE no later than October 1st. The PSD report uses data from the employee master file and the employee job salary records for employees hired as of September 15th. Requirements for PSD records to be created. So these are the requirements set that will pull the person in automatically to the PSD report. That doesn't mean you can't add people later, but this is what's going to initially pull these employees into the PSD report. is that an employee's status on the employee master record must be set to active. Employee pay records must contain valid summary class codes of 0010 to 3999 and or 5000 to 5999, which are your extra pay. The employee job salary records must have a group VU of CERT or RCER. And the accuracy of PSD data is essential as it is used to report to federal government, KSBA, KEA, OEA, NCES, and state legislators, as Crystal mentioned earlier in the presentation. We're going to talk about salary tables first. So your base pay salary tables will be submitted for comparison to the actual PSD files. So the salary tables, you can submit these reports in any, well, let me say CSD. Let's start with CSD. CSD can be submitted to KDE at any time. But your PSD report cannot be submitted to KDE without your salary tables being submitted first. That has to be submitted first because that's what the PSD files are going to compare against. So base pay salary tables will be submitted for comparison to the actual PSD files, and they must be submitted first. The tables will be used to verify each employee's base and extended day reference salary corresponds to the salary tables. So creating the salary table file. An electronic file of the enterprise ERP salary tables will be created for submission to KDE. The file will be submitted using the Seek Data web submission application. In order to submit successfully to KDE, the tables must reflect the following. The naming structure must conform to KDE standards. The salary table file for the PSD submission must contain at least 40 years of data for each grade. All tables must contain the same number of steps. The example here is if rank 1, step 1 table contains 44 steps, then all tables must contain 44 steps. And this is your pathway to creating the salary table file. You're actually going to follow the path through to the Kentucky PSD report, but you're going to select the salary table button at the top of the ribbon. The salary table screen will appear. You'll click search to find the appropriate salary tables by entering search criteria into the effective date and the grade rank fields. You'll select accept to pull the files and the following screen will display. Select the electronic file button from the top of the screen and make a note of that file number because you'll need that for submission to KDE. So generating your actual PSD records follows the same path. The following screen is displayed. You'll choose Generate and then choose Define and enter the information for this year. You'll choose Execute and output any errors and correct those at that point. So resolving PSD report errors. Errors can be resolved by correcting the job class master, employee master records, and or the employee job salary records. After errors have been corrected, the Recalc button can be selected to calculate a single employee's PSD record. So that's important to remember. Recalc is for one individual employee. If you've updated something in Job Class Master or the Employee Master record for an individual employee, you can do a recalc and just choose that employee. It'll look like you're generating the report again, but you should only have one record, for one individual, or two if they could have more than one record. But if you want to make sure that you're only doing the recalc for that individual employee, and it will update that information over in the PSD file. So multiple errors can exist due to a single problem on an employee's record. For example, an employee's record contains error 16, an invalid summary class code. This may also kick out error 6, no base pay record, if the only base pay record for the employee is the record with the invalid summary class code. So a lot of times you may get your error report and have 3, 4, 5 errors for one individual, where if you correct one thing, it will end up domino effect correcting everything else. So the note here is that not all error tests on the KDE submission site are included in ERP. Even if there are no errors when generating the detailed records in Enterprise ERP, there might be other errors encountered when submitting the file to KDE. So you'll email finance.reports@education.ky.gov with questions about submission errors. So even if you clear your PSD report When you go to submit, you still may have an error with the submission process. So manually updating PSD records. Some errors can be resolved by updating the employee PSD records. However, information on these screens will be accurate only for the current reporting process. KDE strongly recommends, as we talked about in CSD, that errors be corrected in Employee Master and Employee Job Salary whenever possible to avoid the same error in the future. And you can do that recalc for one person and bring that information from Employee Master, Employee Job Salary over into the PSD records and have that permanently corrected. You simply select Find and enter the desired criteria to find the employee and select OK. Select Update and make the changes, or press Enter to save the changes. And the note here is that not all fields can be manually updated. Districts are strongly encouraged to make those necessary changes that you can't make. PSD records have some things that are grayed out that you cannot change in the PSD record. You have to go over and change it in Employee Master, Employee Job Salary, which is why that recalc process, can be really important and keep you from having to regenerate the entire report. So manually adding PSD records, you can add, manually add them. They do have to have an Employee Master record in order for you to do that. And again, KDE strongly recommends that you do that in Employee Master, Employee Job Salary to avoid the same error in the future. Your steps that you're going to do to manually add a record is to select Add, enter the information, and select OK. The electronic file. So creating the electronic PSD file. The file must be created after PSD records have been generated. You'll do a find on all records and select the electronic file button from the PSD report screen. After the file has been generated, the export file name will appear at the bottom, and you want to make a note of that file number for submission to KDE. And now we're going to talk a little bit more about submitting. It must be submitted to KDE by October 1st. You'll submit through the Seek Data web submission application. And you can refer to the document Create PSD and CSD Files for Submission, located in the PSD and CSD reporting section of the KDE Enterprise Support and Guides website. And the note here is that the salary table file must be submitted prior to submitting the PSD file. We've talked about that, but I want to stress that it's important. If you don't submit your salary table first, you're not going to be able to submit your PSD file. And in the event you need to submit a replacement electronic file, you've had to change something, you're going to need to submit it again. You need to send an email to finance.reports@education.ky.gov, letting them know that they need to deny your original file so that you can submit a second file. Grab a drink of water. So, important item here is we're going to discuss retirees. So, any of your retirees should fall in one of the 4 bulleted items that we have here. So, if you have a retiree that you question, you should be able to go to this slide, or it's also information that's in your PSD guide as well. But the first bullet says that retirees returning to work as a classified staff member, CLAS or RCLA, should have a summary class code that falls in the 7,000 to 7,999 range. A retired employee that retired paying into TRS, they return to work in a district in a classified position that requires a 4-year degree and will pay TRS, they are coded to RCLA as their group BU. The third bullet says retired employees that retired paying TRS return to work in the district in a classified position that does not require a 4-year degree and will pay SERS are coded to CLAS group BU. And the last one is something that I'm going to first read what we have here and then talk about a situation that we had at CASBO in the spring. So we have retired teachers hired back in a position requiring a teaching certificate will have a group BU of RCER. They should be pointed to a retired employee salary table. The rate of back pay is negotiated involving maximum amounts set by TRS. They should pull into the PSD report. However, the grading step will be blank on the PSD records when records are generated. KDE will not compare the reference salary to any salary table as long as that group BU has been set to RCER. And there were questions about how they were setting up the salary tables at CSBO in regards to retirees in this instance. And you can set up those salary tables however you choose to do that, that so that you pay them however they need to be based on their negotiated rate. As long as their group BU is RCER, because if it's RCER, KDE is not going to compare that reference salary to any salary table, again, as long as that group BU has been set to RCER. So extra service pay. Certified employees who receive extra service pay must have a separate employee job salary record for each extra service job. Extra service job salary records must reflect a job class code linked to an allowable extra service summary class code, and all certified extra service summary class codes are in the range of 5,000 to 5,999. So you can't just lump 3 or 4 different extra service pay positions into one extra service pay position. KDE wants you to have those, and for reporting purposes, they each need to have their own separate pay record. And certified employee job salary records, those employees who receive extra service pay, must contain the appropriate object codes. So you want to use 0112, 13, or 14. Now we're going to talk about mid-year hires that are working in one position. This is the guidelines. A partial year employee will be updated in the PSD file with a full year of days employed when the file is generated. Days employed field must stay at the number of contract days the district has set for the full year on a standard certified contract. And then the areas in red is where we start to see how the true numbers come out. So the reference salary field must contain an amount reflective of a full year salary as if employed for the entire year. So you just think of the reference salary. That's what you're referring to. That's the amount that that employee would get if they worked the entire year. But then the annual salary is the salary the employee will actually receive for the number of days he or she will work. So how is that calculated? We start looking at the FTE, right? The FTE field needs to reflect the percentage of standard contract days the number of days employee will work represents. So the example here is that an employee is hired after the start of the school year and will work 170 days of a 187-day contract. You simply divide 170 by 187, and that gives you the 0.9091 FTE. And that number needs to be to the 10,000th position. So you need 4 numbers after the decimal. The resulting FTE will have to be manually updated in the PSD file after it is generated if it has not been entered on the job salary record. The FTE must be entered to the 10,000th position. So if you try to round that out to 0.91, you're going to get, it's not going to work. You're not going to be able to submit. You want to be able to have that to the 10,000th position. So the grade and step. The grade and step for employees having multiple job salary records should all be the same. And again, we're going to talk about hybrid employees. We just stress the importance of this. You want to verify that employees serving in a classified position but paying into TRS are set up with a group BU of CLAS and object code for base pay of 0130. These employees must be reported on the CSD file, not PSD. So now we're going to talk about the most common PSD report errors. So the first one is no base pay record, error code 6. The problem is that this error test checks to ensure there is a base pay record using object code 0110 for all employees in the PSD report. The correction here is to check to make sure there is an object code 0110 record for all certified employees. The note here is that there is an exception to this error test for ESS teachers who are only teaching ESS classes. Therefore, it is allowable to have a single 0113 record coded to projects 120X or 124X for an employee. I haven't seen that happen or get an error for that, but that is one of the exceptions. So PSD error code 650, which is an invalid object code for PSD records. This error test checks to ensure the PSD record contains valid certified expenditure object codes, such as 0110, 11, 12, 13, and 14. You just want to check to make sure the object code is a valid certified payroll object code. and error code 26, which is an accurate summary class code for the object code. This error test verifies the summary class codes coordinate with valid object codes. Summary class codes are set and maintained by KDE. The ranges for summary class codes along with allowable object codes are below, and you see the summary class code fields and their descriptions and what object codes go with what, as in 0010 to 3999 would require object codes 0110 or 0111. And below are the number ranges to be used when a district wants to add new job class codes along with the allowable object codes for each group. So you've created your new job class code, you've tied it to a valid summary class code. You're going to use the 4000 to 499 range for object codes 0110 and 11. So if you have a summary class code, to give you an example, 0010 to 3999, and you're creating a job class code, you've got to use that 4000 range. If you're at the summary class codes 5000 to 5999, you've got to use the 6000 range. 7000 to 7999, the 8000 range. So when you create a job class code, those are the ranges that you want to use and the object codes that you would use with them. So error code 44, you may think no kindergarten instructor coded in the district that wouldn't be a common error, but it really is. It comes up a lot, and some districts will say, well, do I have to code them to be kindergarten? And you do. This error verifies that all districts have a kindergarten instructor with a summary class code of 2025. So you've got to have someone out there with a summary class code of 2025. The error will state the district has no kindergarten teachers coded. Error code 2720. This is the check reference salary by the FTE minus the annual salary. So this is the PSD calculation code that is in, this is the PSD calculation code. As we had one for CSD, this one is for PSD. So Enterprise ERP will perform a calculation on the PSD record. Reference salary on 0110 records, it's the FTE equals salary on 0110 records times the FTE equals the annual salary. An error is generated when the amount is outside the parameter plus or minus $25. You will verify that the job salary record contains a correct reference salary for 0110 based on the district's salary table submitted to KDE. Then verify that the reference salary amount listed on the PSD file agrees with the salary table. So that's your calculation for PSD reporting. So warnings that you may get, most warnings regard necessary positions to be reported on the PSD report. And one would be the finance officer. If the finance officer is to be reported on the CSD report, you simply disregard that warning. You're going to see that on one or the other reports. If you're doing, say you did CSD first, then you're going to see, you may see that warning if your finance officer is on the PSD report, and vice versa. So we have added some ERP training videos. This is going to be the link to it you'll have when you receive the presentation, where we are starting to, the KDE ERP is starting to put some short snippet videos out there to kind of educate you on some of the processes in state reporting. There are several out there for some of these common PSD and CSD errors. You can actually go out and watch a small video that we have recorded that takes you through the process and how to correct it. Hopefully these will be helpful to you as we go along. And so we'll stop now for questions about PSD reporting and see if you have any questions.
Yes, hi Kim. So in the Q&A, which you can probably see there, we're asked about they have 2 vacant teaching positions open and they're being filled by full-time long-term subs. So they're wondering about how that's to be reported, and I pretty much just reiterated that it's a capture of data as of September 15th, correct? So if those subs are in that position, identified to fill that position and are hired for that position as September 15th, you would report those because their job salary record should probably reflect that at that point. So hopefully that answers that question, and we don't have any others.
If they have any specific, you can reach out to our team and we can talk with you directly about that too if you have questions about those individuals.
The other question I had, of course, somebody's nervous their first time doing this, and I said, hey, no worries, you have this, but the key is, hey, you don't need to wait until September 28th to generate this report.
That's my next thought, yeah.
Yeah, if you have I mean, you can do this now even if you have a few people that haven't been officially placed in those positions as September 15th. Go ahead and get started on this. We have 171 school districts, and this is typically our busy time of year helping and supporting, and there's only so many hours in our day to help 171 districts. So the earlier you start for us to help you, the better.
I have actually already began working with a few districts that had some errors come up and they needed to ask about, and we have worked through them. You can go ahead and pull these reports at any time. You can't officially pull it until September 15th, but the errors that you're going to receive, many of them can be corrected now. You can go ahead and pull that report. It could be that a summary class code doesn't match an object code, and you've got to make that correction so that when you actually pull the report September 15th, you've already made that correction and you're ready to go. There could be more, errors at that point that you receive, but knocking out as many as you can before then, I'm going to have much more time to really help individuals, especially those of you that are new and are doing this for the first time. I know time, I should say, when you have time, I don't like to say that because I know that you all are bombarded with things that you need to do. But if you can take a few minutes and pull those reports and even work on 1 or 2 a day, you've got 2 weeks, a little over 2 weeks before you have to pull it officially. You could get a lot of errors taken care of beforehand and really help. And I'll have much more time between now and September 15th to help you with those things. So absolutely. Do we have any other questions, Kristen?
No, that's it. The other question too is about, I can't recall if I already mentioned this, is they're asking about the slide deck for printing it out, and we'll have that included on the email with the link to the recording. We may not attach to the email, we may drop it on our team SharePoint side. It's a pretty big file, but you will have access to the slide deck when we're send that out later today.
Absolutely. Okay. Well, we've got the last slide that's on questions on state reporting in general, outside of PSD, CSD, any state reporting questions that you may have. We have a shared team email box that we can all, if one of us is busy, maybe one of the other two are able to respond.